short. First, we're going to see the concept of Christian courtship. The concept. After the concept, we will see the course, C-O-U-R-S-E, the course of Christian courtship. After that, we will look at the communication of Christian courtship or in Christian courtship. Communication. And fourthly, we will look at the communion centers or communion places, the places of the communion. And we will conclude with the conduct during Christian courtship. All these will come within the ambits of 1 hour, 15 minutes. I have already established the information I call strategic, that people's problem is majorly because of lack of knowledge. And as a result, they don't know that there are rules in the kingdom. But God's word, we want his children to know that there are rules in every kingdom. And he encourages his servants to put rules in the churches so as to maintain holiness that is essential in the kingdom. Those people that come out of the world and become his children, if they go back to show interest in the world, it is very offensive to him. If somebody is born again and they begin to show interest in the things of the world, in the way of the world, it is extraordinarily offensive to God, as can be seen in James chapter 4 and verse 4. Look at the words that were used of such people. In James chapter 4 and verse 4, ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Called people adulterers and adulteresses. Adultery is immorality, sexual immorality between a married person and a different person who is not the life partner. Adulteresses are women who are married, who are involved in immorality. Adulterers are men married, involved in sexual immorality. That was the title given to people that love the world. When you are a child of God, you are not in the kingdom of Christ, you are married to Christ. If you begin to show interest in the world, then you are an adulterer or an adulteress. So here he says, don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? That your disposition of fondness, of liking the things of the world, the ways of the world, the fashion of the world, that your fondness for it, that you are loving it, is enmity with God. Enmity means hostility. That loving of the way of the world is declaring yourself hostile, declaring yourself an opposer to God. Friendship with the world is enmity with God, hatred with God, because that word translated enmity there was also translated hatred in Galatians chapter 5 verse 20. The Greek word ektra, E-C-H-T-H-R-A, ektra, means hatred. So if you have fondness for the way of the world, the way they dress, the things they do that excite them, if you have that fondness, you are declaring that you hate God. It's a very serious matter. Very serious. So the things prescribed in the church, which we are prescribed under the leading of the Holy Ghost because of the holiness required in the kingdom, because of righteousness required in the kingdom. Those rules are prescribed. Those rules are stated. If you break those rules, you are showing yourself to be hostile to God. Those that say, I will marry, they won't delay me, I'll go and marry, I will just go and marry. The person is saying, I am hostile to God. The rules that are put there for the person's own good, the person says, I won't follow it, let me do my thing. To give other people the link to go that way. The suggestion, the idea to go that way and cause confusion and cause disorder in the church. That is hostility to God. Go home and then marry a lady in your village. Keep her for some time and then bring her back. And then the church, behold, the brother that had been known, brother that was even a worker, he's now coming around with a woman. When did he get married? He wants to suggest to some other young man that they can go home and pick a woman and bring to the church and spoil the church. That is hostility to God. So the rules placed in the church are placed to keep the place orderly. God is a God of order and holy. Please note that the fact that somebody has agreed to marry another person does not mean that God will waive every rule as regarding holiness in interaction. That God will waive it. Since they have agreed to marry, anything can go. Never. Never, never. As long as you are not yet married, the rules hold. It is only marriage that permits a man and a woman to have intimate interaction. Only marriage. If you have promised her, or two of you have agreed, that doesn't permit any intimate relationship, because you have not been permitted. So, getting into courtship is the process of getting to marriage. It is after you have become married that intimacy is permitted. Marriage is the key to intimacy. Deep relationship, deep knowledge of each other. In courtship, I'll show you there is an element of border intimacy, borderline, to get information. But information that is being got must not be a kind that will be erotic, that will be arousing. It must be information for knowledge. The one that arouses is intimate, is not accepted. Why? Because the law against that intimacy is still holding. So, you are in the process, and the process has not been perfected. After marriage, then you can get deep. So, we are going to look at the concept. After the concept, we will look at the course, C-O-U-R-S-E. After the course, we look at the communication, then the communion center, and finally the conduct. Let's see the concept of Christian courtship. What is courtship? Courtship is not dating. Courtship is not dating. Dating is a worldly concept. Dating does not belong to the church, the kingdom. It belongs to the world. Because in dating, the duo want to know if marriage is possible. The duo, the two, the man and the woman, they want to know if marriage is possible. So, the dating exercise presents the actors with a number of potential. The dating exercise presents the actors with a number of potential ends to their relationship. When people are dating, not in church, in the world, they are wanting to know if they are compatible, as it were. It is not courtship. Many times along the line, this person will find out, no, I can't marry him. No, I can't marry her. And so they part ways. But many times they say, let's still remain friends. And then they continue in some form of relationship, but not get into marriage. That is dating. That is not courtship. Courtship, Christian courtship, is not a period of persuasion of one to marry another. Christian courtship is not a period of persuasion of one to marry another. A man trying to persuade a woman to marry him. That's not Christian courtship. In the world, that can serve as courtship in the world. But we are not of the world. So in the world, some people will define courtship as a time of one person persuading the other to marry him. Christian courtship is not a time meant for development of romantic relationship. Christian courtship is not a time that is meant for the development of romantic relationship. In the world, that can serve them. But in church, Christian courtship, it is not a time meant for the development of romantic relationship before marriage. It is true that it will develop, but that is not the primary reason. In the world, yes, they want to know if she is good in bed. They want to know if he is good, if he will satisfy, and all that. That is in the world. In the church, that does not hold. Courtship is not just an act. Courtship is a philosophy. Courtship is a philosophy, a belief that is acceptable as authoritative. And that what made me give the strategic remark of kingdom being different from kingdom. It is not a thing that the people during the early church practiced because of the then circumstance. It wasn't practiced in the Old Testament. It is practiced now because of the circumstance. In the Old Testament, it wasn't practiced. New Testament, early church, people were busy wanting to go to heaven and preach. There was no room for people to have courtship, a kind of. But today, because of the circumstance, because of the surrounding situations, the church brought it in by divine guidance so that the people can be preserved. So it is a belief, a philosophy. Philosophy based on experience and exposure of elders. Early church, once somebody gets born again, next thing is take the person to the water and they will do baptism. But today, after people say they are born again, they need to be given some teaching on what it is all about. And then the person says, yes, I want to be baptized. You then go to baptize. In the early church, there was no room for teaching this and teaching that. That tells you that things do change with time. So courtship was brought in for the good of young people in church. We are going to see the purpose. It is for their own good. Set in to make it good for people. It is one of the teachings bettered out of experience that is in accordance with godliness. One of the practices brought out of experience that is in agreement with godliness. In 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 3, if any man teach otherwise and consent not to hold some words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which is according to godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing. I stop there. There are teachings, doctrines means teachings, that are according to godliness. Some translations will say that accord godliness, that are in consonance with godliness. Some will say that agree with godliness. Teachings. Christian courtship is one of those exercises put in that will assist in godliness. And so the practice itself must not be contaminated. It is given to aid the couple. Courtship is a time of acquaintance. Remember, I said, what is courtship? Courtship is a time of acquaintance, a time of personal knowledge or information about one another. A time of acquaintance, personal knowledge about one another. It is a time of getting to know one another through a well-nurtured relationship. Getting to know one another through a well-nurtured relationship. A well-nurtured exposure. You are exposed to one another under controlled atmosphere. Exposed to each other under controlled atmosphere. A well-nurtured communication. Acquainting with one another under a well-nurtured communication. You are supervised. You are supervised in the exposure of one another. Each person wants to know the other, but it has to be under supervision, lest you fall. Because if you are not supervised, you can fall, and most likely you will fall. The beings fighting you are terrible. They have dealt with human nature, and they are looking for every opportunity to use everything they see to bring you down, so that a good thing that God has given to enjoy will become the person's undoing. The person's undoing. So the individuals, the man, matured man, woman, matured woman, are made to learn each other, understand each other, know each other under a controlled atmosphere, so that sin does not set in, so that none of them get stained, none of them begin to have blood in their palms, because at the time of courtship, you are still individuals. You have not become coupled. So a sin committed under the atmosphere of courtship is a sin before God. It is as sinful as if there was no courtship. So it is knowing one another, trying to understand one another, and study one another under a well-nurtured condition, in order to prove the proposed marriage convictions. Partly to prove that that conviction that you are given, that made you apply or made you agree, is correct, but that's not the primary. The primary purpose of courtship is this second reason. Second reason is to give or promote a seamless entry into marital life. That's the major reason. To promote a seamless entry into marital life. Because marital life is a world of its own. A world totally different from the world of the single brother or the single sister. So courtship is a period in which you are under supervision, allowed to know one another, allowed to relate. As you get exposed to one another, you talk, you exchange ideas, so that you can enter that new world seamlessly with little friction. You enjoy it more if you interacted than if you came from your various places and you are brought together at the same time. It will be a high contrast that can cause breakage. So courtship is a time of trying to understand each other, that you can then stay together with little or no friction. In the course of courtship, you will come to realize that you didn't make a mistake, that leading was of God in the course of courtship. So that is part of the reason. But the main thing is to provide a seamless entry into marital life. Therefore, courtship is not primarily for confirmation of God's leading, but rather of adjustment, adaptation, and arrangement of schedules for cohabitation. Courtship is a time of adjustment, adaptation, and arrangement of schedules for your cohabitation. Adjusting your mind on how you are going to live. Adapting, structuring yourself to align with that life partner. And then scheduling, planning for your joint life of your future. This information is very necessary because that is what will assist somebody to readily live with another. So, in the course of our talk about the content, it is where it plays. If you know the purpose of this program, then you will play your part well in that purpose. People hide things because they don't know the purpose of courtship. When you understand that courtship is intended for the good of the people, for their adaptation, to be able to adapt one to another properly, then the person will be able to say how it is with him, how it is with her, to inform the partner. The would-be partner, this is who I am, and this is truly who I am. This is what I like. This is my inclination, so that you know who I am. The other person also says the same. And then if it is a negative trait, it can be prayed about, and prayers can settle that negative trait. But the person who has known the negative trait will not have in mind that this negative trait is there in the life of my will-be wife, my will-be husband. Those are the things. So courtship is not a time of going to convince the other person. It should really come after one is sure that this is God speaking. So they are planning of how they will live. It is not a time of convincing him or convincing her that I am the right person. Now let's see the cause of Christian courtship. It begins after the confirmation of God's leading and then parental consent. So after parental consent, courtship begins. And it goes through till the time of going to see parents for traditional marriage. So that time of post-parental consent and before traditional wedding is a time of courtship. I want to correct an impression that people might have got from your last exercise, in which God's will, knowing God's will, was taught. I know some people have complained where the statement was made, God's will is not the person but the process. Many people complain about it and say, no, that is wrong and all that. Now, I want to explain that properly so that nobody misconceives that information. When a teacher is focusing on a kind of a subject, he is focusing his attention on something, and he wants everybody to be glued to that thing. He can make such a statement, but that doesn't negate some other statement that is also right. Courtship, God's will is, it is better put this way, God's will is not just the person, but the process. If you follow the process properly, you are going to get the person. That's what that statement is supposed to convey. If you follow the process well, the person will be sure you will not make a mistake. So that's what I believe whoever taught you meant when he said God's will is not the person but the process. He was trying to say, if you follow the process, this process placed by the church, you must get the person. Many people will say it is the person, and then they want to use some other ways to get the person. You will likely not get the person if you don't follow the process. So that should be the correction that people should understand in that last teaching, on that last message by, I think, Pastor Mike. God's will is not just the person, but the process. Following the process, you will get the person. If you don't follow the process, you will not get that person. You will not likely get the person. Now, the course of courtship. We said the people will seek parental consent. And we said the reasons are, number one, to secure parental approval for inquiry into private issues, because each person should let the other know his life or her life. We are still going to come to that. And a man doesn't have right to investigate a woman if the parents didn't give permission. So that is why the man goes to seek the permission of his would-be parents-in-law and then begin courtship. The second reason is that if the parents didn't give their consent at the beginning, after courtship, the hearts of the two are so knitted together that they will not be able to let go if parents said no. Remember that if the lady's parents didn't agree, that marriage cannot hold. The father or the parents of the woman must let go. If they didn't let go, there is no wedding. And the devils do attack children of God if they didn't seek the consent of the parents. Then after they finish courtship and they now want to move, the lady's parents will say, no, she is not going anywhere. And that will now lead to a lot of stress on the man and stress on the woman. So it's better you go at the beginning to get the consent. If you did not get the consent at that time, then you can begin the prayers without any attachment. If you say couldn't pray through, then you want to wonder, you want to ask God, God, are you really the one leading me? It is easier when you have not gone through courtship. But if you have gone through courtship, it becomes difficult to let go. And God can use your would-be parents-in-law to be an obstacle to a thing that he didn't. The person you expected to be a parent-in-law to be a person that will say no, and that no may be that it is not God leading you. If God is leading, God will convince them. So, and then the parents of the man too need to be carried along, even though they are not critical, they are not crucial in the relationship, but they need to be carried along. The man can still marry if the parents said no. He is a man, he is to leave father and mother. But we encourage that he carried his parents along so that there can be peace. If the parents didn't agree, it will be a lot of war in that house. The wife, who is their daughter-in-law, will not be accepted, and it won't be the best for the family. So we seek parental approval. Now, to avoid tarnishing of testimony, courtship period shouldn't last long. Remember, I'm talking about the course, C-O-U-R-S-C. That course should not be long. It shouldn't be long. A watchman will always put it at 3 months. Occasionally, people will say 2 because of maybe they came from abroad. But if it is very short, it is not very good. Courtship has something to work out, has something to do. If it is too short, much will not be accomplished. The purpose will be defeated. If it is too long, it makes provision for committing sin, and then people losing their testimonies. People staining their testimonies, having a mark that is left behind, negative mark, a scar, S-C-A-R, left behind, that will haunt the person throughout life. So it shouldn't be too long, neither should it be too short. So we propose 3 months. That's what we do in Watchman, but it may be better to reach even 6 months. However, if people are saying 3 months is too long, if you take it to 6 months, then people will get mad. So we won't allow it to go too long so that people don't commit sin and stain their matrimonial beds.